Hello, this is Erin with the Joy in Pens and Paper, and I wanted to do a little review of my pens and ink combinations for the month of April. So these were the colors that I considered for the month of April, and these are the ones that I selected along with the pens that I paired them with. And I'll just go ahead and say this was a really, really enjoyable month. There were a lot of things that I grew to really appreciate, and I will kind of go ahead and share. There were a few pens that I had to re-ink because I used up all the ink in them. So I was pretty excited about that. So first of all, starting at the top, the first pen and ink combination that I had was the Platinum 3776. I want to say this is cerulean white, but regardless, it's white and gold. I love that. I have a couple of pens in this little bit more of a neutral aesthetic in my collection, and I am a big fan. This is a fine nib, but it's a Japan or Japanese fine nib, so it's a really fine nib. And then the Pilot Iroshizuku ink is a well lubricated ink, but at least the bottle that I have of Inaho is very lubricated. So I had previously inked it up in a TWSBI Eco with a fine nib, and it feathered on some occasions, but in this nib, it was perfection. I really, really enjoyed this. Let's see, I have just the tiniest little bit of ink left. I actually may do a partial refill of this just to finish out my journaling for this month. And I did a partial refill already. This is one of the ones that I did do a partial refill, but I might need to do a little bit more because I do have some journaling to catch up on that I'd like to use this pen for. No, I don't like it capped. Just had to remind myself if I like it capped or not. All right, so generally what I do is I do a rating out of 10 for pen, for the ink, and for the combination. So I don't think anyone, after hearing what I just said, is going to be surprised, but I'm going to give this a 10 across the board. And again, the level of lubrication in this ink was a perfect pairing for this pen. That is a absolute do again. Love that so very much. Next up is some of my hair in there. The Sailor Pro Gear in white and rose gold, and this has again, Japanese fine nib, but I will also point out it's a sailor fine nib. So a lot of the more, I would call them standard sailors that tend to be an entry-level pen into the sailor gold nib universe, if you will, would be a medium fine or an MF, and generally on a Sailor Pro Gear Slim. And I do have a Sailor Pro Gear Slim with a medium fine nib. This is much more fine. It is a very crisp line, and I initially inked this up with a very dark ink when I got it and kept it inked for a few months. So this was a foray, if you will, into a lighter, less saturated ink. And initially, I must say struggled with that pairing and just thought, gosh, I I didn't do the right thing. This ink is not saturated enough. However, I had a lot of opportunities in the last definitely week, if not more than week, to do a higher level of note taking. And I also have started using different colors in my planner again. I went all black for a while, and now I'm back to incorporating different colors, and I'm using a different ink, pen and ink combination per week. And this week I'm actually using this pen in my planner. I did refill it yesterday, not a full fill because you can see the ink capacity, but I did a partial fill just to make it through the rest of this week, as well as wrap up some journaling as well. I'm just going to say generally for all of them, I want to make sure that there is some ink available to do journaling because I do have some to catch up on, plus to finish out the end of the month. So in terms of the pen, the ink, and the combination, the pen I'm going to give a 10. I prefer it capped. For me, that's the right weight, the right length, all of that. The ink, I will give it a 9 just because originally I was questioning if I made the right choice. However, I really, really grew to enjoy this. So this was definitely one that I needed to give myself some warm up time too. And the combination, again, I'll give it that 9. I do appreciate right here, it looks much more saturated than it does when I originally swatched it at the beginning of the month. But again, this was really enjoyable to do note taking with and my memory keeping and daily planning this past week. The other, and I just put in this last sentence, the other theme that I didn't mention yet is even though this is a really fine nib, I still got to see some of the, I'm going to say chromo shading or color shifting that is present for Birmingham Pen Company Antique Sepia. It was subtle, but I still was able to experience it. And again, as I was note taking, I was able to see the dried line above the line that I was currently writing was a different shade than the fresh ink that I was putting down. And that just was a really nice experience. Next up is the Sailor Compass 1911. This does have a medium fine nib, speaking of, but this is a steel nib, not a gold nib. And this was inked up with Birmingham Pen Company Copperhead. This is a sample that I have from a gift from a viewer. This was, of the pens that I had in this month, one that I gravitated towards the least. This was not one that I gravitated towards for note taking very often. And I think this nib size probably is not the best to show off all of the beautiful properties of this ink. It was a bit more flat, but the pen is comfortable. It's a really good quality entry-level steel nib, and especially an entry level for a sailor because it introduces you to the body size and style. Another option, if you're looking to find out if a Sailor Pro Gear Slim is a potentially good pen for you before you invest the money into getting a gold nib pen, is the Jinhao 82. It's the same body style. So you can get a feel for that. And that's, I think, even half the price of the Sailor Compass pen. So the pen, I'm going to give a 9. The ink is gorgeous, so I'll give that a 9, but the combination I'm going to give a 7. I think I would have really enjoyed this ink color, perhaps in my Leonardo Elastic Fine nib. That probably would have been really nice. So I'll have to think about that. Okay. And you can see I've got a little bit of ink left in there, maybe about a 20%, maybe 25, but I think closer to 20%. So I should be good to finish out the month with that. Next up is the Moonman A1. It's the an alternative version of the Pilot Vanishing Point, but I do have a Pilot Vanishing Point medium nib unit in there. So it does still have the 18 karat nib unit. And I paired this with the Diamine Baltic Breeze because that is a shimmer ink. And I will share with this, and it's a fairly common issue, if you will, with the Vanishing Point is the ink dried a little bit. So when you first start writing, it's a bit more saturated and a bit darker. Let's hope I don't make a big mess. Yes, so this is pretty much tapped out. I gave it a little push up. I have been waiting just to do that at the very end recently. So the reason you see that pushed up is because it's at the very end. I think I might have enough just to write this little blurb right here. And I might do a little top off. I'll see how my journaling goes if I want to bring it back for a day or a few days. So the pen is great. I like it. It's the same body style as a Vanishing Point. I love a Vanishing Point. The ink is gorgeous. And the combination was really good too. This was a good match for this nib. I certainly think it doesn't match the body, but that's okay because that's not a requirement. There certainly are times where I do match the ink to the pen body, but it's not something that I feel strongly inclined to do in the sense that I treat it as a rule or it makes me uncomfortable not to. It just can be fun for the times that I do. So I think it handled the shimmer really well. It just was a really smooth, buttery experience. So that is the Moonman A1. The current, I'm going to say craze right now is the Jinhao 10, I believe. I have not bought one of those though. Next up is the Radius Setimo in Desiderio. This was the Fountain Pen Day collaboration between Radius and Stilo and Steel. This was a limited release, so there were 224 released. This one is number 15, and this has an extra fine steel nib. And this was inked up with Birmingham Pen Company Robin's Egg, and this was another one that I did refill. So you can see it's got a nice fill there. This was really an interesting write. Ultimately, there was a lot that I really liked about it. I think, let me take a step back because I needed to organize my thought there. So the pen I do really love. It's a really nice body style. It's really comfortable to write with. It's a nice weight. It's a nice length. The ink is really pretty. I am going to give it a 9 just because what I'm going to say next in terms of the combination, this is going to sound so silly. I so much enjoyed this pen paired with Birmingham Pen Company Tesla coil, and I found myself thinking of that so many times this month. And I was constantly comparing Robin's Egg to Tesla coil, and I think just because of that, I'm going to give it a 9. Not that there's anything wrong with this ink, it just wasn't Tesla coil, but I am going to give the combination a 7. I would go back to Tesla coil in a heartbeat with this pen because of what a great experience that was. And hopefully my memory is not, wildly skewed. And when I do ink it back up with Tesla coil, I'm not disappointed because I just have thought about that so much this month. And let me make this last sentence make a bit more sense. So I have not picked this pen up for 2 days. And so if you look at the writing here versus this writing right up here, this is much lighter and this is much darker, and I'm going to say moody and shady. And I just really enjoyed this ink a bit more than I enjoyed this ink. So I think that's the other thing that I found that perhaps drew my mind or my memory back to those moments is I would pick the pen up and start writing and it would be nice and dark and all this character. And then the longer that I wrote, it would lighten up and I'd kind of be like, meh. So that was kind of the story there. Next up is the newest pen in my collection, the Laban Teroka in Moon Cave. And this has an extra fine iridium tipped steel nib, two-toned steel nib. It is the same nib that's on the Laban Rosa that I love so much. And I really, really enjoyed this pen. I actually refilled this partial refill yesterday. So this as well is nice and fresh. And I actually did pretty close to a full refill. You can see just that little bit right there. But I had pretty much written it dry and I knew that I still had a desire to continue writing with it. And I actually have been using it today for my note taking. So thinking about the same scoring, the pen I'm going to give a 10, the ink I'm going to give a 10, and the combination I'm going to give a 10. It's just really lovely. And I'm actually using, the other reason I re-inked it is I'm using this ink for my Hobonichi 5-year journal, which I am embarrassingly behind on. I actually, right before starting filming, was filling in some past days, and I had used a similar ink. It might have been Brandy Snap. I should look that up. This same month last year. So seeing in the Hobonichi 5-year, seeing it right one after another, you can see that my tastes are fairly similar. But ultimately, I love an iridium tipped nib. There's just something about that writing experience. It's got a little bounciness to it. It's just very enjoyable. Beautiful. All right. And then the other pens and inks for this month, I think, although I don't see it right here, but I believe I still had some of Diamine Marley in here at the start of April. I wrote that dry and I have cleaned this pen out. So there's that. And I also have my newest Vanishing Point in matte black. This was a purchase with a gift card that I got for Christmas. So I figured that was a nice time to get a pen that had been on my wish list that I couldn't otherwise justify getting for a while. And I had originally inked this up with a black cartridge. And just the other day, I actually refilled the cartridge because there was a teeniest, tiniest little bit of the of ink left in the black cartridge, and I was starting a module and did not believe I had enough ink to get through the notes that I was going to be taking for that module, just based on my note taking with the modules before that. And so I went ahead and used a syringe and added in some Diatramentis Document Ink Black, which is an archival black ink, and re-inked that, which was really nice. So in my experience, the Diatramentis Document Ink Black, while it can take a bit to dry, so using a blotter paper is really good, it flows a little bit better, a little smoother out of this nib, and it is an extra fine 18 karat gold nib. I love it. I loved taking notes. There were 10 modules. The first 6, I alternated between the Vanishing Point with black ink and the Sailor Pro Gear Slim with antique sepia. And then what I would do is, when something in the module triggered a thought for me of, gosh, I don't want to forget this, and I want to be able to come back to this and have it stand out, I would grab whatever the contrasting or alternating color was and jot that little note so that it stood out just in terms of being a different color. So that was really enjoyable. And then last, which this is one I did put, is the Leonardo Memento Magico. And this is the color Jade, and this is inked up with Birmingham Pen Company Blast Furnace. And I mean, this is the ink that never ends, and which makes sense. This has an XXF, or an extra fine, and this is a custom ground nib by oh gosh, who is what's the name of the person? JJ something. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to find it super quick. Anywho, so it is a custom ground nib, and it is very fine. At times, yeah, you can see now the ink is pooling down here. So there's a third to a quarter of a fill here. At times, this nib was so extra fine, extra fine. It would grab little fibers of the paper in the nib. So, and I think I have a mental hesitance when writing with this nib, and I just don't like my handwriting with it. And I think it's because I don't put any pressure on it. And I know with fountain pens, you actually don't need to put pressure on the page because the gravity pulls the ink down. And a really good test of a well-flowing nib is actually just to tap the tip on paper, and without applying any pressure, just drag it across the page and you should see a consistent line. But there was just something about this nib that I'm noticing that I'm very hesitant with it. So that's going to be something that I will need to work on. And I do want to try some different inks with some different amounts of lubrication, and see what impact that has. For example, I'd want to really put an Iroshizuku ink in this to see what that experience is. But I love the color of this pen. There's just so many good things about it. So those were my pens and ink thoughts for this month of April 2025. I hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know from what you inked up this month. What were some of your favorites, and what were your thoughts on the combinations that you put together? And with that, I'm going to sign off. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.